Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the lyrics from Inhuman Condition, Fearsick, out July 15th as a self-release. The album has 9 tracks, 36 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. They are an American death thrash metal band featuring a few former members of Massacre. And that influence in the band's sound, in the band's name, is absolutely undeniable. This is a record that moves at one speed. I mean, the speeds might change, but it moves in one direction. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. It never really breaks character, it never really breaks path. It doesn't try to go somewhere else. It stays very consistent in what it offers and what it gives and how it's going to take the listener from the first to the last track. This doesn't mean that every single song feels the same. This is not a record that necessarily makes it difficult for the listener to see the forest from the trees. I felt like there were enough nuances within this record that each song has its own fingerprint, each song has its own DNA. But when you look at them together, when you look at them from the overall scope of the album, it's undeniable how well they mesh with one another and how many consistencies exist from song to song. So all of this allows the record to stay together, allows the album to be very uniform, very linear, but still create some fluidity and some small ups and downs, some ripple effects throughout the entire album to make the experience a little bit more engaging, a little bit more interesting. As far as the soundscape is concerned, this is definitely an old school death thrash sounding album. You see that all over the place in terms of how they executed the record, in terms of how the album was mixed, the overall production, and then the sound experience that comes from it. I'm a big fan of bands that merge these two genres and do it well, because you can really create an album that stays uniform but still be very energetic, still be very fluid, still be very entertaining, and I feel like this album had all of those characteristics. It's an album that on one hand it feels like it's always in the same place, but on the other hand the infusion or what drives the experience of these songs as far as what's behind them, either be a track that has a little bit more death metal or a track that has a little bit more of a thrash influence, that's what you're going to see the barometer move one way or another. But all around, the mixing of this record really makes the sound stay consistent, stay balanced. You're going to see differences within the tracks, but the output, the experience that you get out of them really allows you to feel like the whole album is one. And that is a characteristic of the sound that's undeniable. It's going to be really clear early on that this record really not going to change who it is or what it's about from song to song. It's going to keep its sound consistent. It's going to keep its sound grounded. This is their signature sound, so that's going to be the calling card of the album. And then there's going to be a few nuances here and there that's going to allow you to better digest the record and feel the differences that exist and not necessarily just focus on the commonalities. As far as the sound overall is concerned, the elements behind that overall sound that really jump into the forefront is the drums and guitars. Now, the drums on this album are powerful, they are heavy, and they provide an interesting backbone or an interesting backdrop to everything else that is happening. But at times they feel like they're lacking a little bit of texture. They feel too hollow. The sound doesn't have the necessarily life in it. The sound doesn't feel warm. It's a real old school approach that obviously has its precedent and it obviously has its impact. This is what the band is all about, so I don't expect them to be that different. But I honestly felt like if the drums had a little bit more warmth in their sound, if the drums had a slight more level of texture to them, the record could be even more unforgiving as far as the heaviness, as far as the brutality is concerned. It would press more on the death metal side, and it would allow also the thrash metal side of the band to drive these tracks a little bit more, to create more of a penetrating sound from song to song. As far as the guitars are concerned, I absolutely loved everything about them. I love the tonality, I love the sound, I love how driven they are, using some acoustic guitars, creating some diversity, creating movements, giving jolts to the songs within the songs from song to song. A lot of the movement that is happening within this track within these tracks while being propelled by the drums, it's really pushed forward and driven by the guitars. So the guitar performance all around is on point, exactly what you would expect from an album that has these characteristics, from an album that comes with this sort of calling card that it has. Overall, when you look at the vocals are the glue that holds everything together. Not that you needed a lot of glue for an album like this, because the album is not volatile enough to start to break at the seams, but the vocals are super consistent, perhaps the most consistent element throughout the entire album. You feel that need to stay in the pocket, to stay grounded, and that grounding of the vocals, that sense of consistency, really allows the album to have a very linear, straightforward approach, not just in its design, because that's there already, not just in the overall experience that you get, but in how the vocals impact that same experience. Now, here and there are a few nuances, there are a few layers, a few textures that change ever so slightly how you approach it, but we're really talking about raindrops in an ocean, not enough to break the mold of what this album is vocally. And what this album is all around is an album that doesn't break ground. It's not a groundbreaking record. It's a record that just delivers on its promises. If you're looking for an old school sounding death metal, thrash metal record that feels relentless at times, that feels grimy, that has that Florida DNA of death metal, this album, this band is definitely for you. Don't expect more than that, because they're not going to deliver. They are who they are. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Caustic Vomit Reveries, a song that feels like it's coming in waves. Sometimes it's very driven, very penetrating, and sometimes it feels more methodic, really grinding you out. The guitars push the experience, but they're helped or propelled by the sound of the drums behind them. All around, this track has a really old school flavor to it. It keeps that old school flavor intact from start to finish, regardless of the movements, regardless of what's moving the track or what's moving the listener through the track. The vocals are synonymous with consistency. You're going to see that throughout the entire record. So this song is definitely not a difference to that hallmark of the record. There are some layers, there are some texture elements involved in the vocals on this track that come in and really spice up things ever so slightly. But once again, raindrops in an ocean, so it's really hard to see them. It's really hard to differentiate those aspects from everything else that is happening. The solos are phenomenal. They have the right texture for the sound, they have the right texture for this song, and they have the right texture for what you're going to get from the entire album. Next, you have King Khan, a somber opening with an acoustic guitar that really brings the mood down. And I love this kind of start because it simmers. It allows you to feel like something is bubbling at the surface, and then when the song finally breaks through and you see the heaviness pouring into the track, everything feels 1,000 times bigger, 1,000 times heavier. That's how this track is built. That's how this track starts. It has a heavy sound, it moves with intent, it has a sense of direction. The vocals help stabilize the track, help create some borders to keep that movement, to keep that heaviness on path and always moving forward. Now, you also have the ability to really stay connected with this track, because there's never a chance for you to jump off of it, or there's never a chance for you to feel like the song is going in a different direction. So everything about this track is about keeping things grounded, controlled, moving forward in a single direction. Last but not least, Wound Collector, great drums and guitars. I mean, the drums and guitars on this song come together as one. They're like a dynamic duo, where one moves, the other one follows, and they're both pulling and pushing forward and taking turns in terms of which one is on the driver's seat. That gives a lot of life to how this track comes across, still keeping it collected and still keeping it all combined in terms of what the rest of the album is giving. It's not a song that breaks mold or breaks path or breaks character with the entire album, but it has some interesting dynamics that you're not necessarily going to find on every single song. And the dynamic of having the drums and guitars working really well and taking turns on which one is on the driver's seat is definitely something that allowed me to gravitate a lot more to this song, that kind of allowed the track to also jump into the forefront as one of my favorites on the entire album. I love the guitars all around in this song. They have a lot of power, they have a lot of drive, they have a lot of different textures and elements to them that really change your perception of the song, that give ebbs and flows to the track. And then the drums behind it, creating consistency, creating heaviness, sometimes a little bit heavier, a little bit more consistent, sometimes a little bit less, but always in the right spot at the right time in order to really make this song feel complete. This is it. Inhuman Condition, Fearsick, out July 15th as a self-release. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.